So appreciate you. Thank you for coming to this session. Thanks for coming to reInvent. I'm Kevin Miller. I head up engineering for Amazon S3. And it's going to be my pleasure today to spend a few minutes talking about some of the broad trends we're seeing within storage right now. And in particular, I want to talk today, Andy in his keynote this morning mentioned the idea of transformation and businesses transforming. And we're going to talk today about how customers use AWS Storage to transform not only their infrastructure, but also then their architecture and ultimately their business. And so I'll share a few thoughts about that. Before I do, though, I just want to start by thanking all of you in the room as customers of AWS and many of you, I'm sure, S3. This on the slide here is just really a small snapshot of some of the many customers that use AWS and S3 and our storage services. And really, the customers really run the gamut. What we're seeing, running the gamut of every industry, every size customer, every geography around the world. There's really no limit to what we're seeing. And one of the things that I think is awesome about reInvent is the opportunity to speak with many of your peers, not just in sessions like this. We have some really interesting chalk talks. For example, we have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is actually doing a chalk talk on their migration from on-premises tape to AWS storage services. So that's some pretty interesting and important data to protect. So you can go to sessions like that, but also just the hallway track and running into these kinds of customers and learning from what they're seeing as well. So thank you. And so as I alluded to, really the focus of my talk today is going to be centered on three different themes that we see within customers who are migrating to AWS Storage. Really, there's three primary motivations that we see. One is around infrastructure transformation. And these are customers who are just looking, who start by looking to improve some of the fundamentals of how they use storage, whether it's security or availability, cost, performance. This is all about really just getting more for the dollar or getting better value out of storage. The second is around architectural transformation. And this is where customers say, I'm looking to increase my agility, to be able to move faster in the applications that I deliver for my business. And so storage is a key part, of course, of almost every application. How do I use the storage differently tomorrow than I do today? And then thirdly is customers who approach saying, I want to transform my business. I want to take a series of steps which really change either my top line or my bottom line, or both, ultimately, in how they use storage. And so, just to dig in a little bit deeper on that, in infrastructure, we're going to talk about a number of themes, including, as I said, security, performance, availability. There was actually a study that was done last year by IDC, and one of the things they found is that when using AWS, they found that infrastructure teams ended up being 62% more efficient on average, and application developers 25% more productive using AWS, which is just pretty breathtaking. And I think really underscores the fact that customers are realizing some of these benefits every single day on AWS. When we talk about architectural transformation, rather, there's a number of themes that we'll dig into a bit. One is around the theme of application modernization and using new patterns for developing applications to increase the agility and the ability to innovate. A second theme is around data lakes or shared data sets in general. And really, I'm seeing the new norm become not just gigabytes or terabytes, but really petabytes or even exabytes of data that customers are either seeing today or are imagining or see that they will get to as they develop and launch new applications. And so just the scale and the breadth of the applications that they're trying to that they're deploying and that they have storage behind is really just increasing pretty dramatically. There's also a theme around data services, which is for us is everything that helps you manage your storage better. When you have petabytes of data or billions of objects, or billions of files, how do you manage that data? How do you protect it, audit access to it, et cetera? We'll talk about that. And then finally, around the edge. Customers increasingly are looking at where does the data really need to live, right? It might be lowest cost to live in an AWS region, but certain subsets of that data may need to live very close to my end customers. So we'll dig in on that. And then finally, and then transitioning into thinking about business transformation, there's a number of themes here. For me, this is just a phenomenally exciting to see when you have a customer who really transforms from what they were doing before to now, using AWS technology and AWS storage, really transforming the way the business operates. One way about that is that we see is around the culture of innovation, and so I'll spend some time just talking about what we do there. And in fact, we have a few sessions here at reInvent talking about Amazon's approach to innovation, which I encourage you to look into. Also talk about all the transformation we're seeing within machine learning and artificial intelligence. You heard a number of the announcements this morning, but really what customers are doing with machine learning in terms of generating actionable insights from their data is really awesome to see, and so talk a bit about that. When I think about transforming business, one of the things that I think I see most commonly in customers who transform is that they migrate from having a relationship with data where it's really asynchronous and offline processing to really more of an online active engagement with data, where whether it's an ML inference algorithm or an analytics or BI tools, they're running in near real time or very close to real time, and the outputs of that operation are not just getting put into an email that goes to a leader or to someone in the business, but rather the outputs of that are getting wired in to the applications that are making decisions on a second-by-second basis. So we'll talk a bit more about that. And then finally, really taking that and applying it to different industries. We see really every industry that you can imagine adopting AWS and storage services for this kind of transformation. And we also have a growing portfolio within AWS of solutions that are really custom built for different industries. And so one of the key takeaways I want to leave here, for you to leave here today with, is that most customers that start have one idea in mind, whether it's trying to transform infrastructure, architecture, or business, but then they discover that there's a pathway to other kind of transformation over time. And our goal in AWS is really to meet you where you are today, whether it's on the left side, the right side, somewhere in the middle, and then help you make that journey, whatever that journey looks like. Every customer journey ends up being real different. But before I get into more detail, I actually want to invite to stage one of our customers who really has seen all three types of transformation. And I'd like Craig Link from Zillow to share with you a few sort of observations about how storage has really transformed their business. So please welcome Craig Link, Chief Cloud Architect for Zillow.
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, I'm Craig Link from Zillow Group. Zillow is the leading real estate marketplace on the internet, empowering people and consumers for the place they call home. 4 years ago, we were running a collection of our own data centers and a handful of AWS accounts. We decided to go all in on AWS. We are now in the process of closing one of those data centers, and I have closed the second. We've also seen our number of AWS accounts increase to over 160. We've also seen by going in all AWS that our different brands started working more together because we had a common platform and a way to share our data more efficiently. Today, we're in the process of transitioning our business. We're moving from a business where we used to do search and find to actually allowing people to transition and move to a place that they call home. When we went all in on AWS, it also meant we went all in on AWS Storage. We leveraged Snowball to move our on-premise data up into the cloud and put it in S3. We use transfer for AWS FTP to allow third parties to update various real estate data into our cloud. We use EFS as an intermediate storage for log ingestion. And we use EBS as a backing store for tens of thousands of EC2 instances running there. We use provisioned IOPS for some of our larger database instances. On top of that, we use S3 as the foundation of our data lake. It is what we've used to really transform our business. By creating a data lake on S3, we build a foundation that we're able to standardize access and storage for the data. The data lands in the data lake through many mechanisms. We use Firehose, we use Kinesis Streams, Apache Flink, and EMR. We store the data in Parquet and Avril formats for future efficient consumption. By creating a shared data lake, we're able to increase data security and decrease costs by reducing the number of copies that independent teams had to have. When building the data lake, we use a number of native AWS and S3 features. We limit access to the data by using cross-account IAM roles. That allows us to follow the principle of least privilege and really limit the data to the processes that need access to it. We use multiple KMS keys to meet various compliance requirements. We protect the data by enabling S3 versioning and enabling S3 bucket policies that deny delete for business-critical data. We're able to control costs by using lifecycle policies and transition data to infrequent access or Glacier based on needs. We're also able to comply with recent compliance requirements, such as CCPA, by making sure we don't keep user data for anywhere longer than a 30-day period. Once the data is in the data lake, we use various processes to enrich it. We use EMR and Glue that do data cleansing and deduplication. We use recognition to do photo recognition and computer vision on photos. We use Textract to perform OCR on scanned documents. The data is then transformed and accessed by various production systems running Spark and Presto on EMR. One of our products is a Zestimate. The Zestimate is used to access hundreds of data points of individual properties across the US. We're now able to predict the sales price of 97.5 million homes within 2% across the US. As we gain additional information about nearby sales and other property changes, we leverage EMR, Kinesis, and Lambda to update the estimate within seconds. A core product of our Real Estate 2.0 effort is Zillow Offers. It's an easier way to sell a home with less hassle and on a timeline that works for homeowners. With a few clicks, a homeowner can request a purchase offer from Zillow. By leveraging the data that's in the data lake and using machine learning models trained with SageMaker running on EKS, Zillow can programmatically create an all-cash offer for the homeowner within seconds. Zillow Offers is currently available in 21 markets across the US. AWS Storage has become the foundation which is helping Zillow lead the transformation to Real Estate 2.0. Storage has allowed us to be more agile, create real-time systems to affect our business, and help consumers move to a new place they call home. Thank you.
Thanks, great job.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, Craig, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of the insight into your journey. It's amazing to see what Zillow has done to transform really from being something that's really focused on kind of search and discovery into now giving cash offers for home, which is it's just amazing. So let's dig in a little bit on the infrastructure transformation front. And I think just to lead off, one of the things that we think is important about our storage offerings is really the breadth and depth of offerings we have. And whether that's object storage, which was our first generally available service in AWS over 13 years ago, to our block storage, which is Elastic Block Store, and to our growing portfolio of file services. So Amazon EFS is our NFS file service. And then last year at reInvent, we launched FSX for Windows File Server, and then FSX for Lustre. So really just a growing breadth of portfolio. And really the depth is there as well. When you look at something like S3, we have 6 different storage classes to provide the right cost structure for data that has different access patterns, different frequency of access, different durability requirements. With Amazon EBS, Elastic Block Store, this is a service that now has millions of developers using it, really exabytes of data being stored. And I just heard that there's trillions of IOPS that they process every single day in EBS. So the other aspect of the portfolio is not just the storage services, but the ability to migrate services. I was actually talking with a customer last night, and what they told me was, we need to get started by just taking what we have and duplicating it in AWS. That's the first step. And then we can pursue the architectural transformation. And I think we've all, that is, I think, a really accurate statement in that I think we've probably all experienced the challenges of doing a Flag Day migration. That just never works, really, right? You have to have a plan to get from here to there. And so it's critical that you be able to do that gradually and safely. So we've really been investing over many, many years in AWS in services that help you do that. So for example, in our storage gateway portfolio, we have a file gateway, a volume gateway, and a tape gateway. Tape gateway, for example, is a drop-in replacement for a tape library. If you have an existing tape library and software that uses that, you can actually drop tape gateway in. It presents a virtual tape library interface, and you can use it just like you would use a tape library. Or with file gateway, providing a way for you to use file services, continue to provide file services in an on-premises or branch office type environment, but have that be backed by S3 in the cloud. And that provides both Samba and NFS-based file access. And in fact, we've been continuing to invest, as you'd imagine. And about 2 weeks ago, we announced a number of new capabilities in our storage gateway portfolio, one of which was high availability. So we had some customers who were using storage gateway, but wanted to have redundancy and an ability to continue operations if they had individual host failure. And so this would be on premises. And so if you're running a VMware vSphere HA environment, you can now use storage gateway in that HA environment and have that capability. We also increased the read performance on tape gateway by 3 times. It's now actually 2 gigabits per second read performance. And we increased the file gateway performance by 4x, which customers can now actually achieve more than 4 gigabits per second of throughput when data is stored locally, and then close to 800 megabits per second when it's coming out of the cloud. And one thing to note about all of these features is that they're available at no additional cost. If you're using these services today, these are just new capabilities that you get tomorrow, or now have today, for no additional cost. And then when we think about moving data over the network or via offline data transfer, there's a portfolio of services as well to do that. We talked about storage gateway, but a lot of customers get started by establishing direct connect links from their facilities on premises to AWS. And once you do that, services like AWS Data Sync, Data Sync actually, for what it's worth, can run over the internet, but a lot of customers elect to establish Direct Connect to have that guaranteed sort of capacity or provision capacity between their premises and AWS. But Data Sync is a very simple service. You point it at a NFS or a Samba share within your internal network, and then that will automatically replicate that data out into AWS. And so we have customers using Data Sync, whether it's for ongoing replication or one-time migrations. There's a lot of actual investment in here to make it go faster than you might normally expect over the network. In fact, some benchmarks as much as 10x faster than what you can do with off-the-shelf open source software. And we launched it last year, but the team has been really moving quickly. This year alone, they've added 8 new major features to Data Sync. So it's just a service that we see a lot of customers using for some of that initial sync. The other, Craig mentioned AWS Transfer for SFTP. There's a lot of legacy services that require SFTP, and really the reaction to the transfer service for SFTP has been pretty remarkable. We have a lot of customers using that, sometimes for long tail type things, but it ends up working out pretty well. And then, for offline data transfer, one of the things I like to say is, never underestimate the bandwidth of a truck full of hard drives moving down the highway. And that's really what the Snowball service is. It's a fully managed service for, you order a Snowball, it shows up on your doorstep, you plug it in, you can migrate your data onto it, and then it has an e-ink label on it. So there's no printing shipping labels or anything like that. You just give it back to the courier, and it comes back into the cloud, and then your data is copied into your bucket. And again, we've been investing in all of these services. I mentioned Data Sync, a number of new features this year, including Samba support. We've added support for VPC endpoints, so you can access both Data Sync and transfer it for SFTP through your VPC endpoints. With SFTP, creating the ability to have sort of logical directories. And then one of the biggest announcements we had with Snowball Edge was the ability to now have block storage on those devices. So Snowball Edge is a device that not only has a lot of storage on it, but actually has a fair bit of compute power. So for offline or disconnected environments where you want to have a little bit of compute with your storage, you can do that, and now you can have block storage on that. So your instances, your Snowball Edge instances can access that block storage locally. So, just to kind of summarize, if I look at the overall portfolio, we think the broadest and deepest array of storage options available, not just in the storage services on top, And I didn't mention yet, but AWS Backup is another kind of core part of that portfolio that we introduced last year, providing protection for data that you have stored in some of the other storage services, as well as all the migration and protection and edge processing services that we have to support the kind of the core storage services. We've done, this year alone, we've done more than 90 new significant features in our AWS storage services, and we're not done yet. We've announced a number today, but there's still a few weeks left in the year. We'll get a few more out, I suspect. But just to highlight a few of some of the services that we've launched, a few weeks ago we introduced S3 replication time control. That's actually now the industry first SLA on replicating data, provides the industry first SLA for replicating data between two AWS regions in S3. We actually provide a 99.9% SLA that your data will be replicated within 15 minutes. And we have metrics available in CloudWatch that you can use to see that your data is being replicated and what the latency is at this point in time. On the block storage side, I think one of the biggest announcements this year was our support for point-in-time crash-consistent snapshots. And for customers who have EC2 instances with a lot of EBS storage and multiple EBS volumes, this is really important to provide kind of a point-in-time snapshot across all your volumes. Previously, to do this, you would have had to potentially pause the instance and then take snapshots. This now provides that with point-in-time crash consistency. We also launched EFS infrequent access as a lower cost storage offering within EFS. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I also talked about we added block storage for our edge computing workloads. And then in AWS Backup, again, we launched AWS Backup about a year ago, and the team has been adding a number of features in here, including regional expansion, as well as automation of backup schedules, but then also launching KMS integration for backup encryption. It's really a bedrock principle for us across our entire storage portfolio that we want you to be able to keep all your data at rest encrypted, encrypted in transit, and not only that, but be able to use KMS, the key management service, for keys, so you have one central way to manage all of the keys that are encrypting your storage. When I sort of deep diving a little bit more into security, we have security, frankly, is job one for AWS. I think we say that a lot, but it's absolutely true. We think a lot about security. We invest heavily internally in security, as well as providing a number of security features that you can use, which in many ways are very differentiated from what you can do anywhere else. So with access control, this is just a very short list. There's really dozens of features available. But for example, object level tags in S3 for access control, that's a differentiated feature you just don't find anywhere else. We also announced today the access analyzer for S3. So this is now a simpler way for you to view the access permissions the accounts that your access policies are granting on your data. And I'll have a screenshot of that in a few moments as well. When you talk about data encryption, I mentioned this as well, but really all of the encryption at rest and in transit, these are bedrock for us, and all of our AWS storage services are integrated with KMS for key management for encryption. On boundary enforcement, VPC endpoints and VPC security groups have been a kind of a core thing, a core way to protect the boundary of your data for a long time, and continue to be one of our core recommendations here. And then finally, thinking about auditing and monitoring, this is an area where I find that the capabilities are far beyond what you can do elsewhere, and it gives you incredible ability to not only see what happened yesterday, but really see in sort of real time who's accessing your storage, what are they accessing, as well as metrics on your performance, so that you can really take real-time monitoring, real-time reaction to what's going on in the environment. And then one other additional thing to announce that is, it's actually coming soon, is we're going to be adding support in EFS to more natively integrate with IAM authorization, so that you can actually provision your NFS clients to use IAM credentials and have the controls within EFS to enforce, for example, TLS, to do root squashing for those of you who use NFS, and then also to limit certain clients to read-only access. So that'll be a cool addition that's coming soon. I mentioned the access analyzer for S3. We announced this yesterday, actually. And so again, one of the things, kind of the key thing here is that this is based on some technology from a team we call our automated reasoning group. And so this is a group that builds software that does static analysis on access policies to really to ensure with a high degree of confidence that this is exactly the access that is provided. So it can look at your policies and say, do these policies provide public access, essentially to someone who might not be authenticated, or what other AWS accounts are provided access for using your access policy. And I'm not going to do this justice, but there's a whole track here at reInvent if you're interested in deep diving on some of the security topics. There's a whole track here, including our STG201 talk, which is getting started with AWS Identity, as well as the STG319 talk, which is a deep dive on Amazon S3 security. So I would recommend checking those sessions out if you're interested in learning more. All right, shifting gears into availability. Availability is core to the services we provide, and just a bedrock principle from day one in AWS is that our regions are composed of multiple availability zones. And these availability zones are not different floors on the same building. They are different buildings. They are separated typically by kilometers, not just a few feet. And but they're all within the same region, which is roughly 100 kilometers in diameter. This is a bedrock principle that we provide multiple availability zones in each of our regions. We have 2 transit centers, redundant transit centers within each of our regions as well. And the transit centers are what connect the region to the internet and to other AWS regions. And so when we look at what other providers might talk about in terms of having 50 regions or high numbers of regions, we then dig in and realize that some of those regions are really just single availability zones, what we would call a single availability zone. And so it's really a real difference in your durability if you are resilient against a single facility failing versus in AWS's case, you're always resilient to a single. In the regions, you're resilient to a single facility failing. A region is multiple facilities. And so just to kind of demonstrate that with Amazon Elastic File Service, this is a fully managed NFS file service. And when you put data into Amazon EFS, before the data is actually acknowledged, before the write, we come back and say, yes, that write is acknowledged, the data has already been replicated and is protected by those 3 availability zones. So you're getting that benefit all the time, automatically. And that's also the same way that Amazon S3 works for our standard and standard infrequent access storage classes, as well as S3 Glacier. All of these services use those 3 availability zones to provide the 11 nines durability. This is what they're designed to provide, is 11 nines of durability. And it's also how these services provide their availability. And for example, EFS has a 99.9% availability SLA. And the way that we can offer that is because we know that if a single facility fails, we have 2 other facilities which will continue to provide availability for all your data. The other thing I would note is that with Amazon EFS, it can be backed up using Amazon Backup, which actually goes into S3. And so if you do that, not only do you get the benefits of 3 data centers, but you get the benefits of 2 completely independent software stacks. You have both EFS and S3, which are independent. And so your data is protected. It's in 3AZs kind of twice, and then as well, it's a different software implementation. And then just to talk about a recent announcement that we had about 2 weeks ago, FSX has now also recently added support for multi-AZ file systems with our Windows, FSX for Windows. And so with this, you have, the FSX model is that you provision the servers that you want, because what FSX is providing is really a native support. It is not that we built a Samba protocol. This is actually built on Windows Server. So there's no concern over app compatibility with FSX because it is just Windows Server providing that support. But of course, it's fully managed. And it's backed by SSDs. And we have, with multi-AZ support, we now have the ability to fail over between Windows servers that are provisioned in multiple availability zones. And we can fail over within 30 seconds. And so this is, again, this is fully managed. We provide this. And we also support Windows continuously available shares. That's something that Microsoft recommends when you're running SQL Server or other applications that really require synchronous confirmation of writes. And then, I also wanted to, before I move on from availability, I just wanted to do one plug for a session that's coming up called, it's DOP 328. This is actually a session where we have 5 different Amazon principal engineers that are going to be talking about different ways that they build reliable services. And so I think that's going to be a pretty awesome talk. Shifting over into cost optimization, we've done a number of announcements in 2019 related to reduced costs. The first one was in February, where we introduced the EFS infrequent access tier at 4.5 cents per gigabyte month for EFS infrequent access. This is about 85% lower than the EFS standard price. And also, once you turn it on, it's actually, we automatically tier based on the access pattern to the data. So you automatically take advantage of this once you enable it. In March, we launched S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So for just about $1 per terabyte month, you can store data in our archive service. Again, just like the other services, this provides 3AZ, 3 facility durability. And you can access data within 12 to 24 hours. And really, it's the lowest cost durable 3AZ durable storage in the cloud. In September, we cut our prices on EFS infrequent access actually again. So it's now 2.5 cents per gigabyte month. This really is the lowest cost NFS file storage in the cloud. One of the things we find from our customers, and we also hear from companies like IDC, is that for file services, most customers find about 80% of their data is infrequently accessed and therefore can take advantage of the 2.5 cent per gigabyte month price, and about 20% ends up being hot. And so when you do an 80-20 blend, you get to around 8 cents blended per gigabyte month for your file storage, which is the lowest cost in the cloud. And then finally, DataSync very recently introduced a price reduction, a 68% price reduction. It's now just 1.25 cents per gigabyte replicated with DataSync. And there's no upfront cost, no minimum fee. You can just get started and really do it on demand. So for customers who are moving a lot of data, we've cut those prices as well. I think it's important when you talk about cost optimization to really understand the true total cost of ownership. And I'm not going to be able to do it justice here today, but when I work with customers and really try to do an apples-to-apples comparison, it's tempting to sometimes look only at the direct storage cost. What does it cost per gigabyte month or for a terabyte of storage? But there's so many other expenses, particularly on premises, that come into the picture, and we often spend a fair bit of time really digging through those, whether it's data center space and power, the networking, all of the maintenance that you have to do, the humans to manage all of this, as well as the expense of migrating data, which can occur, and then the underutilization expense, which I think is often underappreciated, is that if you provision a petabyte of storage and you're only using half of it, effectively your price is 2x what the the unit cost was, because it's underutilized storage. Whereas with services like Amazon S3 or S3 Glacier, you pay as you go. You pay for the gigabytes that you actually use, and if you no longer need them, you delete them. We see every day customers will find data that they can remove and continue growing elsewhere, and so that's a pretty awesome capability to have. We also provide just a number of ways to optimize costs outside of just raw costs. I've talked about all of the storage classes that we have in Amazon S3 and EFS. We are going to be, this is a coming soon announcement, but we will be introducing an HDD tier for FSX for Windows File Server as well. So that'll be a lower cost offering if you're using FSX for Windows File Server. And in that product, we also recently announced a couple new things, including support for data deduplication, which can reduce your cost by about 50% in some cases, as well as the ability to provision smaller file systems. And so just to wrap up this section, we hear this every day from customers, but these are just a few representative examples of the kinds of things we hear from customers around the infrastructure transformation that they can accomplish using AWS. The fact that it's fully redundant, multi-region, more secure at a lower price point from Alert Logic. or the fact that McDonald's found 66% higher performance and an improved latency using block storage, using Amazon block storage. Or Kellogg's, who cut their backup costs by 90% using a combination of File Gateway S3 and EBS snapshots. So these are just a few examples that we have, and there's many more. Okay, I want to shift gears now to talking about transforming your architecture. This is where we find customers, really interested in increasing their agility and being able to deliver things faster for their businesses. And so we think about modern applications and modernization. We think about the new style of applications that have to be able to quickly scale to millions of users, to have global availability. And the kinds of data, the sizes of data we're talking about here tend to be petabytes, if not possibly exabytes down the road, as well as having millisecond level response time. So just far greater demands than we often have seen from applications in the past. And this covers it spans the gamut from web and mobile backends to IoT type applications to machine learning applications, batch processing, just a variety of use cases. And there's a few key patterns that we see emerge from this kind of agility, this kind of application modernization. One is around the microservices pattern, deconstructing a monolithic service into microservices. Another is having a more reactive, event-driven style of application where processing is done just in time versus being done in batch. And then finally, using serverless patterns where customers don't want to have to provision storage or servers, where the system dynamically scales up and down based on the consumption rate, not based on an administrator going in and clicking buttons. And so a couple of really interesting announcements we have in the microservices space. Certainly our container service and everything we've announced there has been very well received. But one of the things that customers have asked us for is the ability to use EFS as a backing store for container applications. And so coming soon, we're going to have better integration for that, where it's automatic and easy to do using things like the AWS Management Console, the ability to just provision storage and attach it to your containers as you launch them in our ECS and Fargate services. And then in the Kubernetes space, for our Elastic Kubernetes service, there's a CSI is kind of a protocol that's been developed in that space for common, it's kind of a common storage layer, so that you don't have to have specific support in EKS or in Kubernetes for your storage backend, but we're going to be plugging EFS into that, so you can just use EFS in those clusters as well. One of the things that's kind of cool, I've kind of posed this question when I think about modern applications. In AWS, we assume every single day is a peak day for someone. That's just the reality of running services like we have at scale. When I first learned which customer peaks on Halloween, it kind of put a smile on my face. But maybe you can think about who would peak on Halloween. And it's not the candy manufacturers, for those. They have to peak many, many weeks in front of Halloween. But the actual peak, one of our peak customers is Ring, which was actually acquired by Amazon in 2018. But Ring has smart doorbells. And so, of course, on Halloween, you've got a lot of doorbell rings, many more than you have typically. I think many times that many. And so they actually use an event-driven architecture using Amazon S3, where when you press the doorbell, it captures some video, it puts it into S3, it generates thumbnails. This is all event-driven as it's happening, and then using that to then trigger notifications as well. And so, one of the key benefits here is that Ring is able to do this. They only pay for what they need what they're only using, and they have virtually unlimited scale. They don't have to worry about provisioning the storage or the servers. This happens reactively in response to the load that they're taking. Another example that I'll share in this application modernization is T-Mobile. And they're using Amazon EFS, and they're in the process of migrating data from on-premises to AWS. And in using EFS, they found that they were able to go to market faster by about 15% using EFS versus alternatives. They reduced their storage costs by up to 70% because they eliminated the need to over-provision and have that underutilization expense. And they found that just the agility was increased because it was no longer taking them weeks to deploy storage, but rather they could easily scale quickly the storage and the Kubernetes clusters using AWS and auto-scaling. So a pretty awesome example of application modernization there. Shifting into data lakes, S3 really is the best place for data lakes. We think we've seen many customers use S3 as the core hub for their data lake. And part of the reason for that is just all of the integrations, both the first-party support as well as the third-party support that we have within S3. So all of the services at the bottom that AWS provides to migrate data, to protect data, as well as things like Amazon SageMaker for all the machine learning training you want to do on it, Redshift and EMR and Athena for analytics, and then services like Kinesis to really help automate bringing data into the data lake as well. And the reason, one of the reasons that S3 I think has been so successful is really just the unmatched durability, availability, and scale. We talked a little bit about this, but it's designed for 11 nines of durability and availability SLAs. It is really the bedrock for a lot of customers' data lakes. One of the things that we heard from customers, though, around S3 is that increasingly, as they had more and more applications and users and teams accessing their data in S3 in a shared data set in S3, is that it was getting to be challenging to manage the access policies for all of those different use cases. And they wanted the ability to really have a least privilege access policy just for the needs that were there. So that's why we announced S3 Access Points this morning. Andy announced it at the keynote. And Access Points now provides a new way for you to provision access into a bucket. We haven't taken anything away, just to be clear. If you have a bucket policy, no need to go rush to change anything. Everything keeps working as it was. But for new use cases or new workloads, we recommend checking out Access Points because now what we're giving you is the ability to provide an access point per application or per team. And then you can set up an access policy just for them and put that on the access point. And now you don't have to worry. If you need to change that access or provision a new one, you don't have to worry about disrupting any of the existing access that's going into S3 because those are separate access points. You can just kind of work within that new access point. You can also lock it down to requiring that access come from VPC only. And so we find that a lot of customers really are interested in doing this and actually in establishing a service control policy which says it can only come from VPC. That's the only way into my data. So we're pretty excited about that, and we'd love to talk to you more about it and hear some of your use cases for it. Okay, so if I just think about now the data services, all of the services that we provide around the core storage offerings. Again, this is really the depth of offering that we see that we think is sort of unparalleled in aggregate. So it's everything from things like S3 Lifecycle to automatically delete data that rotates out of your data lake or provision or transferred into lower cost storage. S3 Batch Operations, which can automate taking action against millions or trillions of objects. Things like S3 object tagging to do object level access control or object level lifecycle rules. And then on the right-hand side, services like taking the ability to take EBS snapshots, and now the ability with EBS to do fast snapshot restoration, which allows you to take a snapshot and recreate many volumes from that within a very quick amount of time. Just digging in a little bit on S3 same region replication. This is a new service we announced a few months ago. And we historically with S3 have provided a cross-region replication capability, but we're now providing the same capabilities within the same region. We have customers who have compliance requirements who may need to take a copy of that data, but they want to do it locally within that region. Some of them may have log files. Some customers have log files, or they want to switch the ownership of certain. They want to take a copy and put it into a different account so that there's some different accountability or different custodian for that data. So we've now introduced this capability in 2019. We've also introduced, as I mentioned earlier, S3 replication time control. It's designed to replicate 4 nines of data within 15 minutes. We provide an SLA at 3 nines. But it really provides that predictable replication time and allows you to monitor your replication. So you know that this is my data, where is it, what's the latency in terms of getting it replicated into the other region. And I mentioned this as well, but just to dig in a little bit deeper on EBS Fast Snapshot Restoration, this is a service where we've heard from customers that they want a way to take a snapshot of data and then very quickly have multiple copies of that snapshot ready to go and instantly restored and ready for high-speed access. And so you can now do this. You can create a regular snapshot, and then once that snapshot is completed, you can then instantly restore up to 10 volumes and then use those volumes on new EC2 instances. And you don't need to provision any additional EC2 instances to do the snapshotting and the fast restoration. That's a fully managed capability on our part. The other thing that is new here at reInvent is the EBS Direct APIs. And so this is a way for customers who want to get access. Historically, we have not provided direct access into the snapshot data. You've restored that into a volume, and that's how you access the data in your snapshot. But with EBS Direct APIs, you can now directly access the contents of your snapshot and essentially see change blocks that identify the blocks that are changing in your snapshot from between different points in time, so that you can then just track the diffs between those two snapshots. So this is actually launching today. Another thing I mentioned AWS Backup. We have a number of features that we're adding to AWS Backup coming soon. So we'll be adding support. We have a number of core capabilities of backup, the scheduling, the KMS integration, the logging and monitoring. Those will all be added to EC2 soon, as well as for EFS, we're going to be adding item level restoration, so the ability to pull out just individual items, files from your backups and pull them back. As well as cross-region backup for a number of our services. So this is all coming soon as well from our to help you, manage your backups more efficiently. Another trend that we're seeing just around architectural transformation is all of the focus around storing and processing data really at the right spot, whether it's storing it in the cloud or at the edge of the cloud. So for example, data that has the highest durability requirements, we're going to recommend you keep that primarily in the cloud and potentially cache that data locally. But sometimes you have temporary data or staging data, and that data really just needs to belong at the edge, or needs to be at the edge for processing purposes. And so, when you look at the kind of the breadth of capabilities, it's everything from the kind of core storage services in the cloud to on-premises services, including the AWS Outpost that we announced this morning, as well as Storage Gateway. For any kind of IoT devices out in the field, there's a whole breadth of IoT capabilities and a whole track here at reInvent to dig into IoT and robots. As well as our AWS Snowball Edge, which has seen, I actually have some pictures of Snowball Edge in some of the environments that it's been deployed into. And you can imagine, these are some of the harshest environments around. So whether it's deployed on a ship at sea, or in facilities that are just completely disconnected, or for example, in a mobile situation where you have a car, you're not going to be able to stream megabytes or gigabytes per second of data coming off of a car. So capturing that locally on a Snowball and then being able to process that data afterwards. That's part of the kind of the core capability we have within those services. And so I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the AWS Snowball Edge now supports EC2 compute, IoT capabilities, object block and file storage options. It has the ability to be put into a cluster of multiple snowballs, as well as to get updates over the air. So these are all capabilities we've added. And our Snowball Edge now supports up to 80 terabytes of hard drive capacity and 52 vCPUs. All right, so that kind of covers some of the architectural, some of the capabilities that we have to really help you architecturally transform. And so the last section is I just want to talk about business transformation and some of the ways that AWS Storage enables that. The first thing I would mention is that this really spans every industry. If I think about all of the industries that we work with, this is just a small snapshot of it. But in every single industry, we can look and say, these are a set of use cases for doing more with storage, for getting insights from your storage. So whether it's about improving the accuracy of control systems or smarter predictive maintenance to reduce equipment downtime, or supply chain optimization. These are all ways that you can use data, generate insights, and actually have meaningful business impact from doing so. And so as one example of this, I have a number of customers that have done this and shared some of their use cases with us. Expedia is one of them. They were able to take a set of data, and instead of it taking I guess 5 days, it then took them 3 hours. And so just a dramatic reduction in the amount of time to process that data and to gain insights from it, using a combination of S3, EC2, and EMR. Another example is TransferWise, and with them they have been able to process debit card applications with a higher availability and be able to deploy it and provide geographic expansion much more rapidly than they would have been able to do previously. And so they now have more than 6 million customers and are using a number of AWS services from EBS, Storage Gateway, EFS, RDS, and AWS Backup to do so. Or another example is Conductor, and this is a company that provides rendering. They have advanced software to render CGI images for movies, and they're using FSx for Lustre, and have been able, in doing so, to really avoid a lot of the spin-up time that it's taken them to provision clusters, reducing that from 2 hours to 30 minutes. And in doing so, reducing the overall rendering time, being able to scale up, they've been able to reduce the rendering time by 75%. And so again, they've really been able to transform their business and do so using FSx for Lustre. Another industry, these are just a broad swath of industries. Another example is Georgia Pacific. They're one of the world's largest manufacturers and distributors of paper products and tissue products. And so for them, it's all about keeping their manufacturing lines running smoothly. And doing so has just huge impact on their profit and competitiveness. And so what they've been able to do is use data and sensors on their equipment, analyze that data, and determine when they need to, what speed they need to run them at, and when they need to do predictive maintenance or preventative maintenance on that equipment. And in doing so, they say, millions of dollars of increased profit. Another example is Siemens. Again, totally different industry, but now Siemens, who, the Siemens security team not just is responsible for protecting their own infrastructure, but is actually responsible for protecting power grids, healthcare systems, other kinds of systems that are kind of important to keep protected. They say they get 60,000 cyber threats per second, and they're using AWS and storage to provide ML, to have ML algorithms running against those threats, and taking, improving their ability to identify and to react to specific threats. And so this is, another great example of using data to really transform the business. The culture of innovation, I think, is such a critical part, and this is something at Amazon we've found in transforming our businesses through data and software and technology. We find that the culture is critically important. And so, for us, that means we start with the customer and work backwards. And we also have to think long term. Things aren't built overnight. So we need to really embed the culture in our teams, embody that culture in our teams, and be able to iterate and react and grow. And so it's been interesting talking to customers, because many of customers have asked me, tell me more about that process. I'm less interested in the details of our storage, how the storage works, but I really want to know how do you think about innovation in that culture. And so I want to just highlight, we actually have sessions here at reInvent that talk all about that. They talk about what we call working backwards, which is really Amazon's approach to digital innovation, as well as the overall culture. So, for example, there's a session tomorrow at the ARIA. I think it's a really interesting program, and we can actually sit down with you and spend and help you, understand our approach and how you can apply some of those lessons into your own business. And just one example of a customer who's used that is Thomson Reuters, and they were able to take that idea of business innovation and culture of innovation and do so, apply it to their own business, and as they say, build long-term competitive advantage. This is a customer that runs 500 global exchanges, processes thousands of requests per second, and is using the culture of innovation and that idea to really transform the way their business operates. I just want to, but as I conclude here, I just want to, okay, it won't let me show that slide. I did have a slide that I wanted to just highlight. AWS has a broad range of partners that both technology partners and consulting partners, and those partners are critical to helping our customers get started, whether migrating data or building new applications on AWS. And so I did want to acknowledge them. Many of them are downstairs in our marketplace. But really, just to conclude, I think I find it tremendously exciting, the kind of transformations that our customers are able to achieve using AWS Storage, and really, it suggests that we take the first step with this today, or take the next step today. So we're very excited to help you do that. We have a number of other sessions. I mentioned several of them throughout the talk, but if you look down the list, we have a number of sessions on different aspects of our AWS Storage. So I'd encourage you to look these up in the catalog and attend if you like. And beyond that, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We are more than happy to engage and chat with you about how you can use AWS Storage to transform your business. So with that, I just want to say thank you. I will take questions outside if you have any afterwards, but I appreciate you coming. And please remember to complete the session survey. So thank you.